Welcome to Joy of the Hang. I'm your host, Sharon Stevenson. If it's your first time here, welcome. If you're a loyal listener, welcome back. If you love wine and sex, then you'll love today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Ryan O'Malley, a dynamic leader with over 22 years of sales and management experience in the hospitality world. Ryan is passionate about growth both personally and professionally and is known for building lasting relationships at every level, whether with peers, teams, or customers. He's also a storyteller at heart, hosting the podcast Hot Sex and Cold Champagne and authoring the book The Girls and the Grapevine, with a philosophy rooted in teamwork, inspired by Vince Lombardi's reminder that, quote, individual commitment to a group effort is what truly drives success. Ryan brings a wealth of wisdom, humor, and perspective to the table. Ryan, welcome to the show. Glad you're here.
It's great to be here, Sharon. Thank you so much for inviting me into your studio. This is actually the first time I've ever been a guest on anyone's podcast.
Oh, well,
so I'm quite honored.
I'm honored then that you picked mine. So first of all, we are going to clink a glass of champagne because
Cheers.
Ryan, cheers, Sante, or right in Sante in French, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we're drinking a French. Tell us what we're drinking. Actually, you know.
So this is a vintage champagne. So all of the grapes were grown in 2013, which is the year. It's Michel Forget, which is in the Montagne de Reims in the Champagne region of France. It was selected by the master sommelier that I work for in McNamara. He's selected a blend of about 50% Pinot Noir and 50% Chardonnay. And then he did the dosage, which is a little bit of added sugar in there. I think he did it at 6 to 7 grams here. So all the acid in champagne, it'll take the enamel off your teeth if you don't cut it with a little bit of sweetness. So Andy loves drinking champagne. Everybody that's been in the wine industry for some time usually falls in love with champagne somewhere along the way. So this is my favorite thing to drink. And obviously, if I included it in the title of my podcast, it was pretty important to me.
It is cold. It's cold champagne. I think we all love a good glass of champagne. What a great way to start a podcast. I think I'm going to do this every time.
This is a good way to start a tradition.
I know. This isn't so bad. So I have a question. Champagne can only be called champagne if it's actually made in the Champagne region of France, correct?
That is correct. There are 319 different villages that you can source fruit from in the Champagne village, but it must be from one of those 319 villages.
Okay. So we were just there a year ago. We were lucky enough to go to Moet, do a tour of that vineyard, or what would you call it? It's not a winery. Is it a winery still?
The chateau.
The chateau, I guess.
Domain.
We were at the chateau. And then, so we went to both, I'm going to say this wrong, but I want you to correct me, Rems, which is how I pronounce it.
That's how I pronounce it too, being not French.
But the French, you were educating me earlier. The French pronounce it
Reims.
Reims.
Yeah.
So listeners, if you're not familiar with it, it is spelled Reims. And for the English amongst us,
we would never say Reims to pronounce that word.
That to us sounds like Rems. So we also went to Epernay, which was amazing. So that's where all the bigger chateaus are, right?
Yes. I have never been to Epernay. I've been to Reims one time to visit one chateau. It was called Charles de Cazeneuve. And this was in 2016. So it's been too long. I feel like I should have a lot more experience with champagne, seeing as how much it means to me.
So what is the difference? I have some kind of champagne snobs, I guess. What's the difference between Prosecco and champagne?
The method in which it's produced, I got started. The gateway drug was Prosecco for me. Okay. And Prosecco is made using the Charmat method, which is to let the secondary fermentation where the bubbles are formed, that takes place in a tank, a stainless steel tank.
Okay.
In champagne, method traditionnel, it is done in the bottle. So the secondary fermentation actually takes place within the bottle instead of in a tank and then being placed into bottle.
Okay.
And it's a lot more expensive, far more expensive.
It is far more expensive. And then if you're drinking a Spanish champagne is a cava?
That's right.
Okay. So that's cava. And so the only difference there between is just really the region?
Yes, it is the region and the grapes that they use to produce cava. So there are some cava houses that use Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but they use a lot of their native varietals as well, Parellada, Girello, grapes like these that many, many American wine drinkers have never heard of.
And what makes one champagne more expensive than another? For example, if I were to buy a Veuve versus a Ruinart versus a, I don't know what the higher end one would be. What, Hillcrest? What's that one? I don't even know.
Uh,
So what's the
so it's a really good
Dom Perignon,
it's a
for
really good question, and
example?
I think the first answer is marketing. I think a lot of people pay for marketing. When I look at wine lists, and it's just part of my job to read wine lists, almost like I'm reading books. It tells me a lot of what I need to know about my account prospects. You see the same names over and over on the champagne section. You see Moet and Chandon, you see Veuve Clicquot, you see Heidsieck, you see Pommery. I tell people all the time the best champagnes are usually the ones you cannot pronounce and have never heard of.
Okay.
But that being said, Krug champagne, Krug is very well known. It's very well respected in the sommelier community. It's absolutely fantastic. It's expensive, but in my opinion, it's worth every penny.
Is that your favorite? If you could have just one,
You can have
he can have whichever ones he wants, and he represents because you are a wine distributor, so you can have whatever you want, probably. But what would be your special
Krug
occasion?
is fantastic. The greatest champagne that I've ever had is 2008 Cristal from Louis
Cristal.
Roederer. And I wanted it to be some small, obscure producer that no one's ever heard of. But I drink a lot of champagne, and the 2008 vintage is the vintage of our lifetime. There has not been a better vintage for champagne in our lifetime than 2008.
And why is that?
You know, Mother Nature smiled on the vignerons that year. So they got the perfect amount of sunlight at the right times. They got the perfect amount of rain at the right times. And it is a very long lived vintage. So that's one thing that the real experts take into consideration is how long you can age these champagnes. And they'll go 40 years in some instances.
So if you have a 2008 in your wine cellar, it's still good to drink.
Oh,
Perfect to drink.
it's fantastic.
Okay.
It's fantastic. It will over time, it will lose some of its bubbles, which is natural. But, that's when you make a toast, I'm not as bubbly as I once was, but I'm as bubbly once as I ever was.
So how should you store champagne? Does that have to, if I've been holding on to a bottle from 2008, does it have to be in a temperature controlled environment?
That's best.
Okay.
That's absolutely best. I tell people to treat a bottle of wine like a hibernating bear. So keep the temperature cool and constant and dark. Sunlight can damage wines.
Is that
And
all wines, red, white, and champagne?
yeah,
All of them.
yeah,
Even okay.
yeah. You want to keep it free from direct sunlight, especially, and then just try to keep as even at a temperature as possible. Cellar temperature is 55 degrees. And that's what a lot of the caves underground in France and Italy are. And when you protect the wine that way, it will last the longest amount of time.
So also I have another question. Should wine be stored on its side or should you store it standing up?
It should be stored on its side. And so you're keeping liquid in contact with the cork. So if it's standing up, that cork is never getting any of that liquid to touch it, and it can become brittle and disintegrate and try to pull the cork out, among other reasons.
Well, we've held on to bottles for several years and I'm curious. So how do you know when a wine has gone bad?
Usually for me, it's the flavor that you can tell that the fruit has really died. It tastes like liquid and
Almost
it
vinegar.
tastes like oak. Oftentimes, when there's no fruit left and you're really just tasting oak juice, the wine is definitely past its prime. And it just takes some figuring out. Sometimes I've opened bottles that I thought would be well past the hill and they're transcendent. And other times I'm thinking I might be drinking this wine too young and it's already dead.
Right. Yeah.
So,
So you
you
just
know,
don't know.
you just don't know. It's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get until you pull the cork.
So yes, and we should do that more often for sure. So I have other questions about champagne. So I often get hangovers with champagne.
Okay.
Is it because of the sugar content? Because of a lot of sugar in champagne, or maybe I'm just drinking too much of it? I don't know.
Truth be told, I'm not sure. I hear people tell me all the time that it's red wines that give them headache, or it's champagne.
The
So you catch a
sulfites.
buzz, quicker on champagne because it's oxygenated. It gets into the bloodstream quicker, and
Oh,
you feel the effect of it sooner because it is carbonated.
wondering why I get headaches more often when I
Oh,
drink champagne.
it could
Seems
be Champagne hangovers tend to be the worst for me, but I think everybody's physiology and biology is different, and
That's
it's just important to pay attention to your body, and if you notice that champagne is giving you headaches, then, maybe only half a bottle.
Does it depend on the champagne, though? I mean, would does a better quality champagne does it matter? Like, if you're drinking a better would it affect you differently?
I'm
So
not certain, I'm
yeah.
not certain that
So if I'm dri
sparkling wines are like rot gut vodka, where, there's definitely a correlation between the severity of the hangover when it comes to the quality of spirits.
right.
Sparkling wine, I'm not certain. I'm not gonna drink enough poor quality sparkling wine to
Well,
figure that
there you
actually
go.
out.
There you
So
go. There you go. Now, what about the great debate between Napa wines and French and Italian wines? So, a lot of people are saying, of course, French wines maybe have fewer sulfites. They're a little more organic than Napa wines. So, what are your feelings about the difference between buying a French wine versus a Napa wine?
well, when I was very green, I got recruited into the wine industry 21 years ago when I didn't even drink. And I walked into one of my accounts the first couple weeks on the job, and the gentleman who owned the shop, it was called Jim's Fallbrook Market. His name was Pat McQuaid. And put his arm around me. He's like, "Ryan, I can tell you're greener than a bell pepper."
That's
But
a great line. You're greener than a bell pepper. I'm gonna
w-
remember that.
one of the things I want to let you know right from the beginning is that the French make the greatest wine. And I have verified that for me, that is true. I think the greatest vineyards in the world and the greatest knowledge of how to farm those vineyards is in France. But I think it's extremely important that people taste wine and figure out what they love. Because if we all love the same things from the same places, we're going to run out and it's going to get really expensive before we do run out. So if Napa wines are your favorite, great. We need Napa needs the support. If
Yeah.
French wines are your favorite, they need the business as well. For me, it's French wines, but I've had life-changing wines from Napa and from Italy. So I don't try to, put down any region. I try to figure out what my favorites are.
Okay, Ryan, you just said something I have to call you out on. What makes a life-changing wine?
So a life-changing wine for me is often the conversation that's had over that bottle. I
Okay.
think I remember bottles of wine based on conversation and who I enjoyed them with very much. If we were in my studio and you were looking at my surroundings, I have a lot of empty open wine bottles that I've written quotations on and
Yeah,
or sometimes who I was with when I drank that bottle. So
I
there's
like
a
that.
prize bottle that sits on my counter of Chablis. And I wrote on there that this is the bottle of Chablis I was drinking when I told my future wife I wanted to make love to her for the first
Okay.
time. And so I saved that and I put roses in it sometimes. And when my wife comes to visit me from overseas, I'll put roses in it, put that by the bedside. And it's a nice little romantic
I love that.
touch.
We're gonna go into that next then, since you just brought that up. So you're married 3 times.
That's right.
She's your 3rd marriage,
That is right.
and she now lives in Peru, so you have a long distance marriage.
That's right.
How does
Yes.
that work? And tell me, how long have you been married?
We just celebrated our 1 year anniversary in July.
Okay. How
And
did you meet?
so we met on the international feature of a website called OkCupid. So
Okay.
I was specifically wanting to meet a woman that lived in another country because I learned enough about myself at the ripe old age of 49 now. I learned sometime in my mid 40s that I was somebody who can feel euphoric chemistry with people and it can cause me to go too fast. I keep an open heart and I can fall too quickly and too hard. And I'm like, all right, if I meet somebody that lives in another country, it will force me to practice the carpenter's rule, which is measure twice and cut once. And the great thing about being in a long distance relationship is that absence makes the heart grow fonder. And so you're always missing the person. You always stay in that in love, feeling the anticipation and longing of the next embrace, the next kiss, and so forth. And then the challenges are well, we go 2 to 3 months at a time without seeing each other.
Yeah.
So we're both in major rebuilding phases, of our life, at post-divorce. So she was a recent divorcee. I was going through a divorce. My wife had already former wife had already left the situation, and I knew that I wanted to have somebody in my life that was sending me, the good morning and the good night texts. And that's something that I think is really just important to me. And it was certainly important at that time of my life.
So I was going to describe you as a bit of a renaissance man after listening to some of your podcasts, which I still think you are, but I also think you're quite the romantic too.
I am. There's
Yeah.
no doubt that I am very, very attracted to people. And I think people are so lovable and so complex, and
Mm.
their complexities come out over a bottle of wine. And that's why, in my podcast, I use that formula over and over. Take two people, one bottle of wine, and 1 hour, and talk with each other instead of at each other. And you're going to have some level of intimacy that comes from that.
Well, the most recent podcast I listened to for Hot Sex Cold Champagne. Let's keep plugging your podcast, and we'll talk about your book too. But you talk about weapons of mass distraction. And I like that. I like that quote a lot because you're right. So many people, if you don't know what we're referring to, it's our cell phones, it's AI. So you're right. So many people are so face and phone that they're not engaging with one another. And
Yes.
the joy of the hang is also about connection and how important connection is throughout our lifetime. So that's why part of my reason for wanting to have the podcast and also write my book was I want to bring that back because it is a lost art. And you're right, sharing it over a bottle of wine and it just relaxes you and it makes you more open and apt to have deep conversations.
A thousand
So,
percent.
yeah.
And this just felt like such a natural show to go on because you're all about connection and community. And I'm really trying to build that as well. I've got that provocative title, but anybody who really tunes in will find out quickly. I'm really talking about relationships and how to build your own community corporately and intimately. I think it's very important. We start off in life around the table of life and we observe other people and we watch them. And when we talk to one another, we get our cues. We find out what interests us, what doesn't interest us. And these podcasts, for me, it's about continuing adult education. I'm fascinated to hear from your perspective what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to share your experiences. I gravitated right away to listening to your show because you're open, and I think that that's important. Podcasts have become the town squares in a large degree.
Well, it's scary, as you know. I mean, when you put yourself out there, you're in a vulnerable space,
Yeah,
and that leaves you open to judgment and
absolutely.
criticism, and we're so quick to do that as a society. Not that I get a lot, but I'm aware of
Sure.
the fact that whatever I say, it's out there, and so I do have to be careful about. I'm not overly protective though, because I do think one of the greatest compliments anyone's ever given me was a person that I met. He said, "The thing I love about you the most is that you're genuine." And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's to me, that's the greatest compliment because I just want people to be authentic. I don't have any time. We're on this planet for too short a time to play games, to
Mm.
pretend. We all should try our very best to live our authentic lives and
Uh,
be our authentic selves."
I think that's beautifully well said. And, the only person that we can ever be fully guaranteed that we are meant to spend every minute of every hour of every day with is ourselves.
Yeah.
Everybody else can let you down. They can leave you. They can die on you,
Mm.
but you've got to know yourself for your whole life. And it's a journey of like
Yeah.
self-discovery for me on a constant, like I feel like I learn facets of my temperament and being all the time. And they come up through conversation and
Yeah.
bottles of wine
And bottles of
oftentimes.
wine, I love it. So how do you manage a long distance marriage?
you know,
FaceTime? Are you guys traveling a lot?
So we have Noche de Cita. So my wife lives in Lima, Peru. So she's Latin American, South American. And so we have date night twice per week. And it usually lasts about an hour now. At the beginning, they were 3 hours long, but now it's just about staying in touch. And as I mentioned, we're both in rebuilds. So
Yeah.
we're both working quite a bit. I wear four hats. I rep for four different wine portfolios
Okay.
and I'm putting in, 60, 65-hour weeks on the regular trying to prepare for our life together. So she will be moving over here with two teenage children. So there's a lot of responsibility on my shoulders to work hard and to provide the kind of lifestyle that it's going to take.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that good for you because that can't be easy to have a long well, I mean, it's much easier now with technology, even though we don't
Hmm.
we're
Hmm.
not hugely in favor of it. At least it's
Using it the
that's
right way.
right. That's the positive side of it.
Yeah, it can absolutely be a great tool. I never want to come across as somebody who's anti-technology, but I'm about social etiquette and manners and learning how to use the technology so that the technology is really a tool that we yield instead of something that controls us. And, the weapon of mass distraction, for the most part, it pits people against one another. It's a very divisive thing. And I recently heard this quote by David Burke from Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. He said that your undivided attention is the greatest form of generosity. And I feel
Mhm.
that in my
I just got chills.
entire being right now because everyone is so distracted and paying attention to screens and being other places in their minds. When you actually connect with people now and pay attention to them and listen, it profoundly impacts them. And it's something that I also want to make much more common in day-to-day operations. It was one of the main reasons I just decided to start a podcast. My job and what I do, it's about how to get people's attention and to hold it. And I've noticed how much harder it is to get somebody's attention and then to hold it because everyone is pulled in 1,000 different directions,
Mhm.
oftentimes by their phone.
Yeah. Oftentimes, yeah. Oftentimes, we'll have the phone in our hands and the TV screen also in front of
Sure.
us, like double distraction, right? Is so much distraction. So I used to own a restaurant. I owned a restaurant for 8 years back in Maine, and used to love it when my wine reps came in.
Uh,
They were always bringing me presents. And I didn't drink a lot of wine. I mean, we didn't sell a lot of wine because it was a Mexican restaurant, and mostly what we sold was tequila, obviously, because we did a lot of margaritas.
sure.
So we had a small selection of wine, but it was always fun to go to the wine shows and all of that. What drew you to this business?
I got fortunate. I got recruited into the industry. So I did not even drink wine when I started. I could tell you which wines were white and wet and which ones were red and wet. And that was about it. And then it's on the job training, also known as drinking. So it's a funny story of how I got into the industry. I was actually flirting with a girl, and so was another guy. And I was in Villa Cerizo on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena and putting orders in at the end of the day. And there was a really beautiful bartender there. And I could tell that this other guy on the opposite end of the bar was also a sales rep. But what proceeded to happen was who can hold this beautiful woman's attention better. And so he had started it, and then I come in and I pick it up, and it was like watching a Wimbledon tennis volley as like her head would turn between these two guys sitting at the opposite end of the bar, and we sort of realized what was going on.
Who's got the better
And
wine?
and when she went to the back of the house, to the back of the restaurant, we had a laugh about it. And we chatted for 30 minutes. These things happen a lot. You meet somebody that's in a similar field and you share some tricks of the trade, you exchange business cards, you go your separate ways and you think nothing's ever going to come of that. And one of the greatest life lessons is it's really all about follow up. And this gentleman followed up with me about 30 days later. And he said, "Look, I was really interviewing you that day. And we've got a team member that's leaving. And I think based upon just your ability to rack with people right away," he said, "that's the most important aspect of what we do in wine sales. And so I'd like you to interview." And the rest, as they say, is history. But that's how I got in. I was flirting with a girl and I
Ah.
got recruited.
Well, and any kind of sales position, I've been in sales my whole life too, and hospitality. It's not you're not selling. It's all about building relationships
Absolutely.
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? It's not even about selling your product. Once you build that relationship, once I had a relationship with my vendors and the people I knew I could trust or call if I needed something right away,
Sure.
those are the people I did business with.
Sure.
I mean, end of the day, that was it.
You have to trust the people that you work with because they are an extension of your business. Their
Mhm.
their success is your success and vice versa. And it's really a symbiotic relationship in the restaurant and hospitality industry. Doing that for 8 years, Challenging. That is,
Yeah.
I have so much respect for small business owners. What was the name of your
Uh,
restaurant?
Bueno Loco.
Bueno Loco.
It's
Good
crazy.
crazy. Crazy
Crazy
good.
good, crazy good. Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
doesn't really translate, but
Uh-huh.
it worked.
I love that.
8 years. And
That's
then
great.
I sold it to 2 of my employees, but carried on
Wow.
years after I left.
Soul filling to
Yeah, it
do
was
that.
really great. It's since closed, but, yeah, it was really great because we unfortunately, COVID hit,
Yeah.
and we were relocating down here to Florida, and was already under contract, but so I thought it was gonna totally fall apart when COVID hit because we were forced to close because it was in Maine, right? I mean, it was in March, it was in Maine, you couldn't really
Right.
pivot to outdoor dining. So our only recourse was to start doing, and Maine was very, very strict. It wasn't like Florida. Yeah, the only thing we could do was um, takeout. And I had, 4,200 square feet of space. I had a big restaurant. So with a full bar, all of it. And it was under contract to be sold, and we just had to renegotiate the contract. So I took a little bit less because they still wanted to move forward. We closed it in March. I think they reopened it in August and continued on for a couple of years. But yeah, it was
The so many restaurants and dreams and were shattered during
COVID. Yeah.
during what happened.
COVID
And
was a rough
I
time.
saw a lot of people lose their fortunes and
Yeah.
their self-reliance.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that it happened to you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry that
Oh, don't be. I tell everybody my favorite day was the day I opened. Look, there was nothing. It got me through a season of life when I needed it. I had just gotten divorced, and I'm telling the story for the first time. I had just gotten divorced, and I had started working in the car business selling cars. Well, I would have my children every other week. I had shared custody, and I was working 50 hours a week in the car business. And so I didn't see my children, obviously, on the weeks that my former husband had them. And then because I was working so much, I really didn't get to see them on that week either. So, and I was a stay-at-home mom before that. So this was soul crushing for me to not be able to spend time with my children. So I thought to myself, I've got to figure something out. I have to make my own hours. I've got to be able to figure out a way to be there for my kids. So here I am, single mom, single woman, still crushed from my divorce. Started looking at franchises. Again, I had no money. I had no business to be doing this, and ended up lived in a small town. This restaurant had gone out of business, and I had the audacity to drive up, and there's a big for lease sign on it. And I called the commercial broker, and I said, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit about this building?" And he goes, "Would you like to see it?" I'm like, "Absolutely." No business plan, nothing. I'm like, "Yes, I want to see it." The very next day, he brought me in there, and I said, "Wow." I knew the restaurant because I've lived in that community. I knew what it had been before. And I looked at it and I said, it just feels like a Mexican restaurant to me. Again, I had no business doing this. Now, I had grown up in the restaurant industry. My family had a restaurant when I was growing up. So I had grown up in that. And I had managed hotels for 20 years. So I understood the hospitality business. I was a general manager. I understood it from a P&L perspective,
Uh-huh.
doing budgets. I understood what food cost target should be. I understood all that. The number part of it I got. And I knew how to employ people and
Mhm,
manage people.
mhm.
So long story short, I see the space. This isn't supposed to be about me. This is supposed to be about you. So I go into the space and immediately fall in love with it. It's got this big copper hood, and it just feels like it's got this Mexican vibe.
Mhm.
Well, there was no Mexican restaurant within a 10-mile radius. That town already had a couple of Italian restaurants. It had Chinese and American, whatnot.
Mhm.
Did not have Mexican. And at the time, Chipotle Grill was the fastest growing franchise in the country.
Right,
So I'm thinking
right.
there's a need. The people, we're in Maine. There's not a ton of Mexicans, but definitely that food choice is something that's wanted. So by the grace of God, we come to an agreement. I go home. I said, I'm going to put together a business plan. I run the numbers. I'm like, I think it can work. I start going to banks, and they're like, no, we're not going to invest in a restaurant. Are you high? So I'm like, wait a minute. And then, of course, every door starts getting shut in my face, right?
Mhm.
Everyone's like, most restaurants fail in the first year. It's going to fail, blah, blah, blah. So I get all these negative messages. I run into all these obstacles, and something inside of me said, just keep going because you can do this, right?
Yeah,
Again, single mom. And my why was, I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there when they get off the bus. I need to make something
yeah.
that I can manage my own time. So the landlord and I came to an agreement, gave me 6 months to do the build out. Business plan made sense. I had a small amount of money in my 401k that I took a loan against. So
Mhm.
I invested in myself. And I found a local bank who gave me another small loan. It was only like $30,000, but it was enough to buy some equipment that I needed. I opened the doors and there was a line out the door. I mean, we had built
Wow.
so much anticipation for this restaurant. I hired a great chef. So this is what you do. You build a team of people that know more than you do. And I took my ego out of it and I said, I need a chef who can create an amazing menu. And we had a Mayan inspired menu. So it was I'm still very much into health and wellness. So he lived a vegan lifestyle. So we brought a lot of vegan items, a lot of fish, that kind of stuff. But it was a really amazing menu. Then I hired a bar manager because I didn't know a thing about, I mean, I knew again how to manage him, but I didn't know the first thing about how to make a drink. Then I hired a front of house manager. So he put together the table setup and managed servers. So that was my team. And I had an accountant and an attorney. I built a team and we were hugely successful. So we made a ton of money. But I remember, you're going to love this story. I don't know, a month in, payroll comes in. Now I made the mistake of having payroll on a Friday, which you never do because all of your money in the restaurant business comes in on Friday and Saturday. You are not making any money Sunday through Thursday. You're not. So I made all my money on Friday and Saturday, and Friday was my payday. I didn't have enough money in the bank to cover payroll, and all these checks started bouncing. So I go to the bank, and I went to the manager. This is actually a really good lesson for me. I went there, talk about community. I still get chills when I think about it. I literally sat at her desk across from her and said, this is what's happening. I had to face it. And I was crying. I had tears coming down. And I said, I built this. I had no more money to put into it. There was no reserve. I didn't have any big capital. Everything I had was there. And I loved my people so much that I was like, I can't let them down. What can we do? I said, I know I'll have the money in the account on Monday morning. She said, we're going to float you the money. We're not going to penalize you. We're going to cash the checks. And then you're going to go and talk to your payroll company and you're going to change your payday to Tuesday or whatever.
I love that story.
I mean, but that's community.
Absolutely.
So like I said, I never left that bank because she had my back.
Of course.
When I needed it the most. And that's what we do for each other. That's humanity.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
I went on way too long.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful that you invested in yourself and you shared that because the human connection, the human touch is something that I have felt receding for a long time. And to hear a story, it's good to hear stories sometimes when people do the right thing and believe in people and help them. It was an easy but a not easy thing what that person did for you. But you're telling me about it and you're telling other people about it years later. And that's the power of hospitableness and hospitality.
And it's the power of doing business with your local bankers. Yes. I have to give a shout out to local banks because, and same, I had some food vendors that same thing. There were times when you hear, look, the pandemic was perfect. There were times when you hit some rough spots and it was the people that had your back that you kept going back to and back to and back to. I did business with US Foods and, I remember a couple of hiccups along the way. And trust me, if any of you have been in the restaurant business, that hiccups are going to happen, right?
That's who I worked for, by the way, when I was recruited into the industry. I was a sales rep for US Food Service.
Yeah, well, again, they were really great to me. So every year, PFG and Cisco would come and want my business. And I'd be like, sorry, these guys have had my back. I don't care if you can give me an avocado for 10 cents cheaper.
Good for you.
Yeah. You support the people that support you.
Absolutely.
Right? That's how it works. So I want to talk more about your podcast. That's enough about me. I love the name. How did you come up with Hot Sex and Cold Champagne? Where did the name come from?
I liked the contrast. And really the genesis of that name was that's just my favorite wedding toast. When I go to weddings and people are rambling on and on and on.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know what? Say something witty, something clever, and just drop the microphone, and I joke with people that, that's really, the two key ingredients of a marriage that goes the distance. Now I'm on my third. I wish I had come up with Hot Sex and Cold Champagne sooner, perhaps.
Well, what did you learn from the first two? What did you
Oh,
learn? What was your takeaway?
oh heavens.
Because they're not failures, they're just they're growing
They're learning
pains.
so the first one was, young. It was first love, basically, and I was 22. I got married at 22. No, not many people should get married at 22 in our modern world, and I got divorced at 26. So, a big life-changing experience. I grew up extremely religiously conservative, and it was sort of this, this puritanical idea that if you have sex with someone, you should marry them, and I
Okay.
just sort of, I sort of went with that. When you're young, I think you're on your parents' program. And, I had a mom that was a deeply religious person. And I think I
Yep.
was trying to be the good son, and I got married young.
Okay.
Um, and divorced young as well. Definitely a life changing experience. The second one was a COVID marriage that I'm not sure how deep you've gotten into my podcast, but that I definitely talk about that
Well,
one
my
a little
listeners
bit,
don't. My listeners haven't.
a little bit. So I had a COVID marriage, met somebody literally on April 8th of 2020 and had this intense relationship with. And I think the circumstances of my salary being cut during COVID and so forth, I moved in with somebody too quick after about 2 months. And I felt that there was something wrong pretty quickly, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Having a big open heart and really trusting people and really being focused temperamentally to observe people and be patient with people and help them work through their issues. I was spending all of this time trying to figure out, how to fix somebody or how to help somebody, and they were not treating me well at all. And I was blind to it for some time. And then I figured out what was going on. And I confronted my wife. She had a personality disorder that's talked about, I think, quite a bit these days. It's called narcissistic personality disorder. And when I confronted her about that, I said, look, I took a vow, and this is the second one that I've taken. I learned from the first experience. And if you will go to counseling, I will stick this out. I will stand beside you, even though you're impossible to be with. And she decided to cut and to run. That was the most valuable experience of my life. It was the most painful, but the most valuable experience of my life because it's like being bitten by a radioactive spider. It changes you. Being someone who's always been fascinated by human dynamics and relationships my whole life, it became a missing puzzle piece because I had never experienced such abnormal psychology before. And so when you're dealing with somebody who actually has enough narcissism to qualify for a diagnosis, you can't miss it. You can't miss it anymore. And
Hmm,
so now it's like I have narc radar and I
I
can see
see.
it. And it teaches you the difference between normal conflict in relationships and abnormal conflict in relationships.
I don't want to get too personal, but if you wouldn't mind
Yeah.
sharing, can you share, like, give me an example of what a narcissistic behavior would have been?
It
Narcissistic.
is the constant put downs, the devaluation. So every relationship that somebody with narcissistic personality disorder goes through, it's the same pattern over and over throughout their life. And that three-pronged pattern is idealization. So they idealize somebody first. And then the second phase is called devaluation. And unfortunately, that's like the body of a novel. It's the longest part. And then the third stage is what they call the discard. So they literally throw the person away after they've used them up. And she was so critical of me and demeaning. And it's a highly hypocritical personality style where the person that has the disorder will allow themselves everything and allow you nothing. And over time, I started to feel like Marty McFly in the photograph that was just fading out. You feel like you're standing on the tip of a match in an endless ocean. And all of all of their territory is everything around you, and you just have to sit still on the edge of the match tip. You're constantly on eggshells. It affects your central nervous system. And so when it was over, entire relationship was 20. I went to therapy and the therapist diagnosed me with post traumatic stress disorder. I mean,
Wow.
it's that intense. And if you've experienced authentic narcissistic abuse, those are the people that get it. The hardest thing for me, now that I feel like I've recovered from it, is how inexplicable it is because my former spouse was a covert narcissist, not an overt narcissist. An overt narcissist is easy to see. They come off as ostentatious and they tell you, I want money, fame, and power. And that's what they're all about all the time. And they're not shy about it. A covert narcissist does their abuse and devaluation behind closed doors. And if you saw my former wife, none of my family had any idea. And you learn that people put on happy faces. And I realized after through deep self-inspection, I was putting on a happy face. I can go back and I can look at the pictures where we look happy. And then I have to remind myself, yeah, but 5 minutes before that, or 5 minutes after that, she was this terrible human being. And I don't know if I've painted a good enough picture. I mean, there were overt instances of abuse, like, being cajoled beyond all reasonable human contact to wear a dress against my will. So that's control. Control, domination, superiority are what somebody with narcissistic personality disorder feeds on. And they use you as their human stress ball. So to regulate their mood, they have to get a rise out of you. And so they will goad you.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I remember seeing like a look in my former spouse's eyes that it was almost like she got a hit of heroin when she could get under my skin.
Wow.
And I could never do anything right. Whether I got her the diamond ring that I picked out was too big. The black pearl earrings where, it doesn't look good on, with her dresses. No matter how hard I tried to be the man of her dreams, it was always do better or try harder.
So
And it's
did you see
emotionally
this
exhausting.
after? Because you obviously fell in love with her enough to ask her to
Yeah.
marry you. So was this behavior apparent beforehand and you ignored it, or is this something that
Yes.
showed up
Yeah, that's
after?
that's the hardest thing is that you have to grow from something like that. You have to take responsibility for it. You have to acknowledge. And when you can actually acknowledge that you play a large role in that, in your own suffering, that's, I think, when I started to get better. But the signs were there and I overlooked them thinking naively as the idealist temperament that I am, that if you love someone enough, you can change them, but you can't. You cannot love someone enough into changing them. They have to be willing to change. That's the saddest thing about narcissistic personality disorder is that the fault is in everyone else's stars. It is the inability to self-reflect on the way that you speak with, communicate with, and treat other people. And that's why they never seek treatment. That's why, they think everyone else is wrong with them their whole life.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing the story because the word narcissism is thrown around a lot. We
Yes.
see it on TikTok and Instagram. I mean, everybody's a narcissist nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And gaslighting and all of those terms is thrown around a lot. So I appreciate you sharing your experience because it is a real thing. And some people do go as far as being clinically diagnosed.
Yes.
So,
It's depending on the studies that I've read, it's between as few as 1 in 200 or as many as 1 in 20. Which are scary figures. But I think the weapon of mass distraction does contribute to general
yeah.
narcissism. But after having experienced direct in your home narcissistic abuse, I'm very careful about applying that word, and I would never do it lightly to another person. And there's no animosity in my heart whatsoever. If my former spouse were to walk in here, I would give her a hug right now. And it's like I forgave that. I let that go. And that's how I've had to heal myself. Occasionally the weapon of mass distraction will send a triggering old photo. This crazy thing that it does. I wish somebody needs to create an app of how to like delete a face out of your weapon of mass distraction. This would make you a lot of money
Well,
if
I
you can
think
come
you
up
can
with this.
can you block or like unfriend or
You know,
I think it exists actually.
yeah, well, thank you.
I think
Like I'm not tech
yeah.
savvy. I'm human tech,
I think
and
we can do that. We can figure that out.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
So tell me about your book, The Girls on the
So
Grapevine.
that
Is
book
it
is
published? What's going on
it
with it?
is not.
Okay.
It is not yet published, and it's actually not yet finished. So I've written 43 chapters of it, and it is a life goal to get that published by the time I turn 50.
When do you turn?
I have a little less than a year. So
It's
I turned
coming up.
49 in August,
Yeah.
and so I really need to buckle down. And it's a very challenging thing to wear four hats and to have as much going on in life. My challenge is making the time to do that. And the podcast is almost like a beginning stage of that. It's like, okay, let me get myself talking, thinking, creating, and then maybe that will parlay itself into, okay, so now I've already put it out there for the universe. I've stated my intention that this is what I'm doing. This is my goal to get this book published by the time I'm 50. Now it's making time for it and dedicating the time. And it's a coming of age story. And any good coming of age story is one that demonstrates that the acquisition of good judgment comes about through the exercise of poor judgment.
Well, and also, like anything good, like a fine wine, it takes time.
Absolutely.
It doesn't you have to let it marinate sometimes and let it sit.
Abs- uh,
Can't rush it.
1,000%. And the experiences, even the harshest ones, become the greatest fuel for your greatest words and your greatest expressions.
Well, I have to just tell you, I'm gonna compliment you because you're a really good writer, and I consider myself a really good writer as well, and I'm listening to your podcast, and I think the last one was this one. It was called The Girls in the Grapevine,
Oh, wow.
and so you had read a couple of chapters, I think, and
Yeah.
I was very moved by your writing, and,
Thank
you
you,
talk about
Sharon.
your children a little bit, your daughters, and you talk a lot about a lot of different things, but I was really intrigued and couldn't stop listening and wanted to hear more, and that's the sign of a good author.
I appreciate that,
So,
Sharon. And I do want to see this book make the light of day. I do think that there's a lot of valuable lessons in there for individuals and then for corporate. It's kind of like Sex in the City for the wine industry. But
okay.
it's a personal it's my own personal narrative, but I've worked with so many people in my life that I love to I love to tell their stories. And originally, the book, it's so interesting that that book was going to be somebody else's story. So I was
Oh,
going to
okay.
write a book called The Girl in the Grapevine.
Okay.
And that, as I mentioned, people can walk out of your life and so forth, and life is strange. I realized, okay, I intended this to be somebody else's story, but you're always left with your own story. And that's where okay, we'll just add a single S and it'll be my story, the girls in the grapevine.
I like it a
So,
lot.
but there's some bombshells in that book. There really is.
Looking forward to it. I can't wait for it to come out.
Thank you.
So we have a year to finish
Yes.
it.
Thank you. Hold me accountable.
Well, I will if you want me to. However, I am a believer in divine timing. So I am a believer that it will happen when it's meant to happen. So I don't believe in putting pressure on ourselves to and I say that probably because I had a similar goal when I was your age. I'm a little bit older. So I had a similar goal to complete something. And it didn't happen in that time
Mm.
and I felt a lot of disappointment because I wasn't able to accomplish the goal in a time frame that I wanted. And now I am publishing my book, and it's coming out on September 9th, and it's taken me thank
Fantastic.
you, it's taking me much longer than I anticipated, but having said that, now I know it's what it was meant to be.
That's
So, it
incredible.
wasn't ready yet, and
That is
it's taken this time to be ready.
now, is this a nonfiction book or a
It's
fiction book?
kind of self-help. It's also it weaves a lot of personal stories
Mhm.
into, like you said, this message of but it's all it's I would say it leans more self-help in that it's all about connection, so we
Okay.
have that in common.
Mm,
It's the arc of connection throughout our lives.
okay.
So it starts at conception. It's the sperm
Wow.
and the egg have to meet for the first spark of life to happen.
Absolutely.
And then we're immediately tethered to an umbilical cord, and there's
Mm.
that connection. And then it starts with our family, and then it goes into our childhood and our friends and how our connections are based on proximity. And then
Yeah.
it just kind of evolves through life, and it evolves all the way into our final hang, which is really the legacy we leave behind.
Oh, that's beautiful. What
Yeah.
is your book called, Sharon?
It's called Joy of the Hang. It
Oh,
follows the podcast. Yeah,
fantastic.
and the title comes from a podcast that I was a Jay Shetty podcast I was listening. You'll have to listen to this one. But anyway, yeah, Tom Hanks was talking about being on the show, and he talks to Darlene Love backstage at the not Jay Leno, David Letterman show, and sees her backstage and says, "I love what you've done. You created the soundtrack to my life, and why do you keep showing up here year after year?" It was around Christmas time, and she came on David Letterman every year to sing "It's Christmas." It was a thing that happened for several years, and her response was, "I just come here for the hang." And I'm like, that's it. That's what life's all about. It's
Absolutely.
about the hang. It's about the connections we make throughout our lifetime. It's our legacy,
I love that metaphor that
right?
you've used. It's seamless.
It's seamless. So I talk about how we are biologically wired for connection.
Yeah.
It's not an emotional thing. We shouldn't feel bad for needing it or wanting it. We are wired for it biologically.
1,000%. And,
So
I love that metaphor. And I use a similar one, saying that we take our first drink. The first time we eat, it's almost like it's a
it's true.
drink.
It
And there's
is.
that connection we're bonded right away
It's
through
nourishment.
that.
It's
And it sticks with us our entire life,
100%.
feeds us.
It feeds us. It's right.
The human
It
connection
nourishes
it
us.
nourishes us,
Right.
literally.
Exactly. So yeah, so we have that in common, which
Uh-huh.
I love.
Uh,
But yeah, and then of that episode, that's where the podcast was born. I was looking for a name for the podcast, as I'm sure you did. And you go through all these things like, nope, that's not right. That's and then finally here I am walking with my earbuds in and I'm listening to this other podcast and I'm like, oh my gosh, light bulb moment.
I get my best ideas when I'm walking.
Yeah.
I'm a serial walker.
Walker or the shower. Or it'll come to me in my sleep. I have the most vivid dreams of anybody I know.
Wow, okay,
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by that because I don't
Oh,
remember my dreams
you
very
don't?
often at all.
I'm always telling my husband, he's always surprised. I'm like, oh, last night, this is what happened. This was
That's
the movie that was playing in my head. Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. I wish that I had vivid dreams.
Mhm.
So,
It's not a good thing because you're constantly like, I
yeah, I
don't know
have a
what.
hard time going to sleep. I have a hard time turning my mind off.
Do
So,
you?
I'm an insomniac for sure.
So we have your book to look out for. We have your podcast to
Yeah,
listen
season 2 will
to.
start soon. So,
Really? Or
yeah,
how
season
many
2.
episodes do you have?
So I published the first season was 20 episodes,
Okay.
and I told the audience at the end of season 20, I'm going to take a few months off and I'm going to read and get new material, and then
Yeah.
digest it, and regurgitate it.
You read a
You-
lot. Like your memory skills are incredible. Seriously, you're like always
I don't
quoting.
know. I don't know how you know
Like
that.
because you were
Actually,
quoting
Sharon.
like Stephen Covey, and you're quoting all of these, and I'm like, man, I
So
don't know if he's actually writing this down or if he's recalling this. And who's you like the poet is help me out, help me,
William Blake.
William Blake. I was going to
Yes.
say Blake. And so William Blake is your favorite poet. I know it because I do my homework. That's how I know.
It's very clear that you do
Homework.
great homework because the questions are so great. But yeah, so we have season 2, probably 2 weeks. I'll start that. I think the first episode, I've already got the title, Epiphany Wines and Epiphany Sex. So
You're changing the name of it?
no, that's the episode. The
Oh, the
episode will be
episode
called
for your first.
Epiphany
Oh,
Wines
okay,
and
good.
Epiphany Sex. Everybody that gets
Okay,
into
good.
the hospitality or the wine industry,
Yeah.
they always talk about their epiphany wines. The bottle of wine, like in the movie Sideways. The female character Maya, her epiphany wine was 1985 Sassicaia. And so everybody who's done this for 20 years, like I have, they have these handful of epiphany bottles. And so
What does that mean? Explain me. What would an epiphany bottle of wine be?
Well, so when it causes a light bulb
When
to
I'm
go
like,
off.
oh,
So so usually what they mean is, I get great ideas. I drink and I know things, is that, that t-shirt says. But the epiphany is usually the bottle is so pleasurable or enjoyable that it is that spark that creates that lifelong thirst for this. And it pulls you to try more wines and to keep looking for your next epiphany wine. And so it's like the 2008 Champagne Cristal champagne. That was an epiphany wine for me, is that, oh my God, this is as good as champagne can get. Ethereal. It puts your mind on another plane entirely. That's an epiphany wine.
are you seeing any changes in the wine industry?
Yes. Yes. Difficult changes, headwinds. So from a grape glut situation in California, actually many places, but California, Napa is certainly experiencing it. Just too much wine and not enough people to buy the wine. So, another real primary reason for me starting my podcast was to engage Generation Z and millennials because they are not drinking like my generation X and baby boomers. So, the biggest changes that we're seeing are structural changes where younger people are not drinking at all. And I want to get to the bottom of that. And I want to let people know that I'm all about social responsibility and I'm all about using wine as medicine in the correct dosage. And that it absolutely can make your life more interesting. It makes you more interesting to other people. There are very good community oriented aspects to imbibing with people, mainly from the conversation that it brings about. And so we have to figure out how to get Generation Z more interested. And so my thought was if you're old enough to drink, you're also old enough to start talking about relationships and sex and figuring out who you want to be with in life. And, it's being a fine wine appreciator is all about figuring out which wines you enjoy and which ones you want another sip of. And that becomes relationships and life. You figure out which wines of character do you enjoy, which people of character do you enjoy, and which you want to spend more time with and less time with.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
yeah, and I wanna use the formula that master sommeliers and masters of wine have for learning about wine. It's a three-part test. Is theory, followed by blind tasting, followed by service, and I think that that's just such a wonderful teaching lesson to tell younger people starting off in life and starting their own adventures that, "Look, you get all the theory in the world from tuition." What's tuition? That's the expensive fee we pay other people to give us their best ideas and learnings. All right. So you get these from church and you get them from school, but it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll that teaches the experiences in life. And it's almost like I want to put my arm around the neck of younger people
Uh-huh.
and say, look, I wish somebody had told me these things when I was your age. And so, I'm taking on this sort of mentorship role with younger people. And I think that wine is it's the greatest form of culture that we have. And it's the ultimate interplay of man working with their nature. And that's part of my podcast. You have to develop yourself or life gets very, very hard.
Yeah, well, it's partly that the younger generation is leading a more sober lifestyle, but it's also partly, I think, that we now have seltzers and we now have so much more competition in the market,
Yeah,
right?
that
That
is true.
people just gravitate towards that versus enjoying because I mean, let's face it, the truth of the matter is wine can be daunting. When you
Mhm.
go into a wine store and you look at the shelf, if you don't know wine, for me, it was like for years, I was like, okay, that's a pretty label. I'll try that. And that's mid priced. It must be good.
Sure.
So that's how I chose my wine. It's really so I think for the younger generation, it can be a little overwhelming
For sure.
to say, and it's expensive.
Yeah, there's definitely an economic component, but I want and all of the people I associate with in the industry, they want to demystify wine.
Yeah.
They realize it can be daunting, as you say.
Right.
But I knew nothing when I started, and it's a great way to learn. Continual adult education. Okay, so you're going to get involved in something, or you're going to have a new hobby, and it's going to teach you about culture. Best way to learn culture is through a country's food and wine.
Agreed.
And so, at 18 years old, many places you can drink at
Yeah.
18. And it's
Mhm.
like, I wish that somebody had more responsibly taught me when I was younger, how to enjoy the things because it's when you completely say no, that's completely off the table where you have binge drinking and you have problems with it.
Well, and that's a cultural thing because you go to France or Italy, right, and they're drinking wine at a very young age. It's part of their culture.
Right.
Yeah. Here
It's just
it's
part of life.
prohibition.
Yes. Yes,
Like
we
you
have we
cannot.
have prohibition, we have, the temperance movement, our history is steeped in stuff like that. I came from that. My previous religious days, I came from a denomination that alcohol was not allowed.
Yeah.
It's interesting how life and experiences change our perspectives.
Well, I love a good bottle of wine and but unfortunately my body as I age, the tolerance level to it has diminished. So
You're exactly right. And so so if we do not attract, if my industry does not attract new people, people are going to age out. We can't metabolize the way that we once did.
no.
And so we have to keep it going.
Yeah, I have friends who still can. God bless them.
I
But I myself
know.
realized I cannot do what I used to be able to do on Friday
Isn't
night
it
and get up Saturday.
crazy to get older? I mean, when I was a
Oh,
teenager, I used to think of ways of how to escape the house to get to the party. And now I think of ways to escape the
the
party
party
to
to
get
get
back
back
to
to
the
the house.
house. It's
Well
just
said.
crazy.
Well said. Well said. But to your point, nothing brings it is so amazing to be in a culture where people celebrate food and wine because
Yeah,
when we were fortunate enough to travel France for 5 weeks last year, and everywhere you go, people are so excited to talk about the wine and then the food pairings that go along with it. And it's just a beautiful way to communicate with another human being, to enjoy two of my favorite things.
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. It's
You know,
social lubricant, literally.
it's wonderful. Yeah, it really is great. So we have to wrap up. Unfortunately, I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to wrap up by asking you, what advice would you give your younger self?
What a wonderful question. So I would say apply yourself sooner so you can fail faster.
Apply yourself sooner so you can fail faster.
That's right. And then you learn from that failure. Failure is a better teacher than success. And so one of my regrets is not applying myself sooner, not getting in shape in my life sooner. I look back on my high school football playing days and I'm like, I was never a star because I hadn't applied myself yet. And so I think that that's my advice to my younger self is be more disciplined early, apply and then fail and then keep growing through failure.
I love that because we're so afraid to fail,
Yes.
aren't we?
We have to get over it.
We're
It's one of the
so afraid.
primal fears is of failure and
Yeah.
then the ridicule that comes from failure. But we have to learn that we can't care about what other people think, that it's really about how we think of ourselves on the inside.
Amen. And guess what, listeners? We're all going to fail at something. I don't
That's
know
right.
anybody that's gone through this life without failing at something.
That's right.
And if you have, God bless you because yeah, I can't say that I have. I
Well,
failed several times and I keep getting back up.
that's
So,
right. That's the most important thing.
right.
And it's been so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your
Well,
show, Sharon.
thank you for being
And
here.
congratulations on your book.
Thanks. And thank you for the champagne.
You're absolutely
I
welcome.
love it. I'm
Let's do
so
it again.
yes, absolutely. Okay. We'll see you later.